Hello, I'm John Challis and I am a patron of Cuan Wildlife Rescue. Now, I've got a little story here about a friend of mine that you might like to hear. Anyway, here we go. This is called Bear's Story. Now, you may be surprised to learn that Bear is not at all what you expect him to be. No, he's not that big bumbling furry creature that looks a bit like a teddy. Bear is a hedgehog, and a very special one. Now, hedgehogs don't usually have names, of course, because they're wild creatures, and as they all look almost exactly the same, the names wouldn't help much, would they? I expect you're wondering how a small creature like a hedgehog comes to have such a big name. This is how it happened. Bear is a young hedgehog, but he's not a baby. He's already learned all about being a hedgehog, and especially about eating as many of his favourite crunchy beetles and worms as he can catch during the autumn, while he looks for a safe, warm place to have his long winter sleep. Now, last autumn, Bear chose a little dry nook under a pile of wood in a cottage garden. The soil was soft, and he pushed in some dry leaves to make a comfy bed out of the wind and rain. When he was ready for his big sleep, Bear crept in and curled up tightly with his feet and ears and eyes and nose all tucked underneath his prickles. He looked just like a prickly ball. And if you were not looking very carefully, you might have thought he was just a little bunch of scratchy twigs. Bear had done the big sleep before, so he was quite happy to close his eyes and dream hedgehog dreams until the weather was warm again. But this year, something was wrong. Something that made Bear very uncomfortable in his winter bed. Something kept waking him up. Something that was very itchy and scratchy. What Bear did not know was that some tiny bugs, so small we can hardly see them, had made their homes on his skin, where his prickles grow. Bear's skin was warm and the bugs were very comfortable, so they had lots of baby bugs, and soon there were hundreds and hundreds of them. They crawled about and they got under his skin, in his ears and in his eyes. He was so itchy and scratchy that he just couldn't sleep, and he felt quite poorly. His skin became very sore, and then his prickles started to fall out. Bear got cold because by now winter had arrived and sometimes it was freezing. He didn't look or feel like a hedgehog anymore. He was a very miserable little animal, and so cold as he tried to find something to eat. One day when he was outside, the lady who lived at the cottage found him. At first she thought he was a lump of earth because he was just in his skin. It was plain brown, without any prickles. She bent down for a better look and saw that he was alive, but she didn't know what he was. In fact, he didn't look like anything she had ever seen before. He hardly moved, and she could tell he was in big trouble. But just in case he wasn't friendly, she put on a pair of gardening gloves before she picked him up. She took him into her kitchen to look at him carefully and saw that he had a few prickles left around his neck. "Oh, you poor cold thing," said the lady. I think you must be a hedgehog." She found an old shoebox, put some paper in the bottom, and popped him in with a clean tea towel over so he could hide. "I know just the place for you," she told him. She put Bear's box on the floor of her car and took him to Cuan Wildlife Rescue. "If anyone can sort you out, they can," she told him. Although Bear, of course, had no idea what she was saying, as he was too poorly and too cold to care. Cuan Wildlife Rescue is a very special place where people can take wild creatures that are sick or have been hurt so they can be mended and get well again. It is deep in the countryside and is very, very quiet, which is really good for wild things. The lovely people who look after the animals were shocked when they saw the sick little hedgehog. He was so small and thin that at first they thought he was a baby. Then they checked him over to find out what his problems were. Then they bathed him gently, and when he was dry, put him in a small fleecy bed to rest and get warm. They put some fresh water nearby in case he was thirsty, and when they looked later, they found him asleep on top of the fleece, and when he woke up, he managed to eat small, meaty chunks of cat food. An animal doctor called a vet came to see him. He said that he would have to have a proper look at the little hedgehog's skin, especially in his ears, his eyes, and his tucked away places. They gave him some special air to breathe through a tube so he would go to sleep and not be upset or frightened. They cleaned his skin and put soothing lotion on to make the tiny bugs go away. When the little hedgehog woke up again, he was back in his bed and feeling much better. Before long, he was enjoying cat food and crunchy biscuits. The vet said that with lots of good things to eat, he could slowly get back to his old self and grow more prickles. But he would have to stay at the centre until he looked like a proper hedgehog again. A lot of baby hedgehogs spend the winter in Cuan Wildlife Rescue because they're too small to go into the big sleep in the autumn. But none of them have names. If you remember, wild creatures aren't usually given names, but one little bear hedgehog is very special. He needs extra love so he can go back to his life in the countryside and cottage gardens. That is why the people at the centre decided to give this little hedgehog a big name to help him along. So they called him Bear, just until he returns to the wild.